Skip it or stream it. You ready for this?
We're going to try to dive into this one. It's a big story and there's lots involved. But yep, we are now talking about Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story.
Yes.
And that is the second in a series of monsters.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was Dahmer.
Right.
Both done by the same creator.
Now, what's interesting is that this show, and I think the documentary before it as well, has reopened the case.
It has. It's all over the news now. A lot of his, the Menendez brothers' family are pleading to judges to say, let these brothers out already.
Right.
Justice has been served. They've done their time. Over 30 years in prison now.
I know.
If you're unfamiliar with the actual story, two brothers killed their parents on August 20th of 1989. And Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez brothers, is talking about the events surrounding the brutal slayings. Mm-hmm. And then Lyle and Erik both were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Yes, and there's always more to the story.
Yes, like
I'm a very cause and effect kind of guy.
Well, the brothers cited that there were years of abuse for the reason for murdering their parents.
Precisely.
And now the prosecutors argued that the motive was for them to get their hands on the family fortune. Now, their father was involved in Hollywood. And
he was in the record industry too.
The record, and then
movie
the movie industry.
Yeah.
And I believe at the time of his death, him and his wife's death, their net worth was at about $14 million, which in the late 80s, early 90s is a large sum of money.
Well, even today, that would be enough motivation for someone.
Yeah.
If they were in the right frame of mind. But my question when I watched it from day one, because I hadn't heard enough about the story back in the day. I was too young. I was too young. I wasn't paying attention to it.
I followed that story because I've always been into true crime, and that was all over like hard copy.
Oh, of course. Everybody was talking about
Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah.
It was so sensationalized back then, and it was all over. Even like SNL, we were doing like mock comedy skits, which I found in very poor taste.
Well,
to do mock comedy skits about two brothers and just the pain of the families, and it was a brutal slaying.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was the first thing I noticed about it was the difference between how we look at mental health now versus back then.
Right.
Because we weren't talking about those kind of things in reference to this. Like you said, everybody was making fun of them. Now I'm thinking, what caused these guys to get in this state of mind? What could possibly have driven someone that far? And I don't think it was the money.
No.
You know, and I still, there's some details in the story I need to sort out, and I haven't seen all the episodes like you have, but there's more to it. And so I wanted to credit abuse right away and not full on blame them. But I don't know, too, given the rest of the story, man, who to blame.
Well, and especially because, some people are saying, oh, well, these boys have mental issues. But I mean, they had suffered years and years of abuse. If the allegations are true, the problem is
that's believable.
Exactly. So, I mean, because an average 19 and 21-year-old does not go and kill their parents.
Trauma,
they were given everything in life. Like they went to the best schools, they lived in the best neighborhood. Their father bought them cars. I mean, by on the outside, they looked like they had the perfect family.
This would never justify it, but I'm always convinced trauma is involved with things like that.
Absolutely.
There's killing going on. Occasionally, just a straight up chemical imbalance, but even then, I still think because we've all experienced trauma. There's something has contributed to it,
Now, the problem I had with the whole series, though, was that Ryan Murphy, who's the creator of it, he also did the Jeffrey Dahmer one. I found it was very campy and it was tongue-in-cheek, and it was almost like he was making fun of not only the story,
the
pain and the situation.
He
made the brothers very one-dimensional for at least half of the series. They came across as spoiled little brats. Well, it was only until the second half when you saw them opening up to their lawyer that you started to see that there were many more layers to these characters. And the Ari Grainer, who played Leslie Abramson, the Menendez brothers' attorney, she was brilliant.
Right. Okay, so my watching schedule on this was I saw the first 2 episodes, and then I jumped ahead to episode 5 because I read a couple of reviews at that point.
Award-winning performances.
And everybody recommended to watch that one. It was, as far as acting, the best performance. But you just nailed it. We were talking about this before we hit record here, and I was trying to put my finger on what it was that was a little bit off for me about this show. I couldn't quite the acting was
almost
off,
like
the
a
writing
parody.
was off. And you nailed it. It's almost like this guy it made me uncomfortable, not the way about the story itself, but about the way it was presented. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I think it's this guy's attitude, the director's attitude, coming through in the story and the way it was written.
Yeah, like he obviously has a slant.
Yeah,
I can tell.
Well, we always do.
I can tell he's not a fan of the Menendez brothers. You can basically 100%. Tell that because it was very written from the side of these two guys are jerks and they deserve the death penalty.
There was something lowbrow about it, or just bad humor.
Well, we're not alone because the whole Menendez family has gone back and said this is disgusting. The brothers themselves had no part in the making of it. They basically went off of documentaries and the court case
what
and
they
stuff.
knew about it from
right, but they never actually talked to the brothers at all when they created this monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story.
That should tell you something there too.
And they said they were very unhappy with the way they were presented as well because they weren't even asked about to cooperate with. And you'd think you're going to make a movie about these two guys, you would at least interview them.
Well, of course, it tells you what the authenticity of the documentary might be in the first place, too, if they're not willing to contribute to it.
Right.
What is it actually saying?
We'll never know the true story. Now, the brothers did admit that they did kill their parents.
Right.
So, yes, they are in prison for that. But the big decision was, is it manslaughter or is it first-degree murder? And eventually they decided that there was a hung jury first, then it was first-degree murder, then it was, are they going to get the death penalty? They were spared the death penalty, but they're separated. They were separated in prison. They're actually back together in the same prison now.
Yeah.
Because they do need, I think they really need each other and they rely on each other. I say stream it, but stream it with a grain of salt. That if you know the story, like I actually know this actual story, there's more to it. Right. And do your research if you want to know more about the actual Menendez brothers story.
Now, I've seen a total of 3 episodes out of the 9. Is that how many there are?
9 or 10, I believe.
Okay, well, whatever it is. I'm actually going to I'm taking the opposite view. I say skip it. Do your research. There's plenty of material out there in the story the way it is. If you want to form an opinion about these guys, skip this series and go elsewhere. 9. Skip it.
Yeah, there are other documentaries and series, and there's some great books and stuff that you can get the information from. Yeah. It's very campy, and it does seem very insensitive.
Well, there you go.
Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story, now streaming on Netflix.